Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast. I'm excited to get started here on our training for why women-owned small businesses are not winning government contracts. We're going to get started in just a second, but I'd like to say thank you to those of you who show up on time or early, just as a way to say thank you for doing that, because when you do, LinkedIn pushes it out to others and lets other people know in the GovCon space that we're doing this training, and so it brings them in. Today's tip I want to give you is from Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. If you haven't read this book, it is by far my #1 business book to read. And it's a really old book, and it's completely applicable to today's world. But anyways, in the book, one of the habits is begin with the end in mind. And my tip for you is to just start thinking about some of the activity you're trying to do by beginning with the end in mind. Where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve? And then I call it reverse engineering. Well, a lot of us call it reverse engineering, but reverse engineering, what does it take to get to this goal that you have, right? And Stephen Covey talks about when you begin with the end in mind, you know where you're trying to go. And then all the steps that you're planning out will begin to lead to that spot. In today's training, I'm going to talk to you about some things you can do that will begin to help you start down that path to winning more contracts. And so winning more contracts is our end game, beginning with the end in mind. And some of the things I'm going to talk to you about today are going to lead to that destination that you want. So keep that in mind as you plan through your day and the activity you're trying to do, that it's a great thing a great habit to have, is just beginning with the end in mind. All right, we're going to get rocking and rolling. Thanks for the engagement on chat. I really appreciate that. And it's your community, so definitely engage in there. If you're like other small businesses, you might feel like you're doing all the right things. You're listening to all these different people, me, PTAX, SBA, whoever. You listen to a lot of us, you hear our advice, you feel like you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing, but you're not winning contracts. And sometimes you feel like you're not even, let alone winning contracts, you're not even really getting in the door. And I want to talk to you about that. But one of the things I would say is, if you feel like you're doing all the right things, are you doing all the right things? And I'd like you to keep that in mind today, because I want to submit 3 ideas of right things you should be doing that maybe you're not doing enough of, or you're not doing them at all, or you're not doing the right way. And I'm going to cover down on them, because if you follow them, you're going to have traction. In this training today, I want to share 3 tips for increasing your likelihood of winning contracts in the federal space as a woman-owned small business. Obviously, the tips I'm providing for women-owned small businesses during the month of March here can be applicable to like a veteran-owned small business, because it's process, and we'll talk more about that. But today I'm going to be talking about 3 things, right? You need to make sure you're visible to buyers when the buyers go looking for a seller like you. The second thing is you need to build strategic relationships within your target agencies, so they're there for you when you need them, and they're strong, ready for you when you need them. And the third thing is you need to let buyers know that you're interested in working with them and capable of working with them. Right? You can't just assume that they know this. And so we're going to talk about how do you let them know that. In this training, I'm going to give you tactical advice. I don't come with just the what, right? The 3 bullets I just said are the what of the training, but I give you tactical advice, what to do or how to do what I'm saying, so that you can move forward and show people that you're ready to start supporting their agency. Anyways, okay, so as we move forward, do me a favor. If you're a woman-owned small business, since we are focus on women-owned small businesses. If you're a woman-owned small business, or you support women-owned small businesses, in the chat, just put women-owned small businesses rock. You can put WOSB rock, or WOSBs rock. Put that in the chat. Let us know. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to my federal sales training, where I teach tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. Process goes from A to Z. And when you follow that process, you have repeatable, predictable results. And that's what we want for you. That's what our training is all about, is helping you get to that stage. Before we start, do me a favor, help buyers remember who you are. Put your company name, 2 or 3 keywords into the chat that tell us what your core competency is. This is really part of the process. When I say government contracting is a process, When you show up to training like this, make sure people know who you are. This is me, this is my company, and this is what we do. 2 or 3 words on what you do, not whole paragraphs, because you want it to be easy to remember. If you haven't done so already, I want to make sure that you're aware of and that you download the 3 small business federal directories that we have. The first one is Small Business Specialist. This is over 1,000 names of federal buyers, small business specialists or professionals in all of the different agencies. So over 1,000 different names, numbers, and emails. We've got it all together for you. You just got to pick up the phone and call them. So there's that one. That one's worth tens of thousands of dollars, the amount of research that's gone in. It's the only one of its kind out there. And so download that. It's free. And then the next 2 are the long range acquisition forecasts directory. It's got 100 plus in there, and supplier portals. This is where agencies and large primes have their own supplier portal where you want to register. I'm going to talk about being visible to buyers today, but I'm only going to talk about one place. This directory, the vendor and supplier portal, has like 100 other places. And so definitely download this off of govconchamber.com. Finally, I wanted to say thank you to the GovCon Chamber of Commerce sustaining members. We don't take any money from the federal government. We don't have large prime contractors sponsoring us. Sustaining members like you are the ones who make this possible. You make this training possible. You make those directories possible. And we very much appreciate what you do to support us as we continue on our mission, but also what you're doing to support the whole small business community. Together, we could do so much. And I just really appreciate that. Let's go ahead and dive into today's training. Let me just make sure I line my steps up here. So let's get started talking about why women-owned small businesses are not winning contracts. And more importantly to me, what we can do, 3 things we can do today that will start moving the ball forward. So we look at this as more of a positive. What can I do to start winning more contracts? So the first one is we're not visible to the federal buyers. I've done a lot of different training where I talk about how the government looks for buyers. And the number one tool that they use is this tool called the Dynamic Small Business Search Tool. But I wanted to back up for 1 second and just tell you about the process federal buyers follow when they go looking for a seller like you. So if you think about just in government contracting, right, we have somebody has an idea in an agency, they want to buy something, and they go down this path of market research. And market research can come in 2 different categories. Sources sought in RFIs is one category where they're reaching out and formally asking for industry to respond. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the other way that they do market research is they just go out and research. And the number one tool that they use for research is the Dynamic Small Business Search Tool. And actually, I just want to share it just in case there's people who aren't familiar with it, because this is the number one place buyers go to look for sellers in the federal market. It is the only tool that they're really trained on and say, hey, go look at DSBS and other tools to find sellers. And I want to tell you today, there is a radical change in the DSBS tool from the last 5 years. And so this change has just happened over the last week. I use DSBS every day and I see when things happen. And I'm going to point out probably right now a major change. But let me share my screen really quick. Okay, I think I'm sharing the right screen, and if I am, I'm sharing the DSBS tool. I want to point out when buyers go to look for sellers, this is the number one place they come, the Dynamic Small Business Search Tool. It's dsbs.sba.gov. If you're in business in the federal market, go to that tool and put your company name in and search for your company. Search on keywords that you should be found in, things like that. I want to show you, though, just how it works. So let's say they're looking for a woman-owned small business, and they come in here and say, I want them to have a required certification. And if I come down here, I'm going to type in cybersecurity, just use this one. And this tool has been up and down through the morning, so we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it'll search for me right now. Good, it worked. So when I searched for women-owned small businesses, cybersecurity, only 130 profiles came back. And this is the first major change I want to tell you. There are tons of small businesses out there that say cybersecurity, but the way that the DSBS tool has been changed by the SBA is now they really are only returning results that have this capability narrative. And so the way the buyer searches for you is they first come in and say, I'm looking for a woman-owned small business, and they throw a keyword in there. I don't believe they do NAICS searches because when you look on a NAICS code, it returns too many results. But when you search on Elevator or SharePoint or cybersecurity, the results are much more limited. And so that's what they're trying to do, is to get a tighter set of results. And so they search on a keyword along with women-owned small business certified. And when they do it, the next thing they do is they look at this table. You notice this is how the default information comes back to the buyer. It says, hey, here's 130 companies. And they scroll through these companies just looking. The first thing I say is they're looking for companies that have cybersecurity, that they communicate that they do cybersecurity. So they read these narratives to see what's in there. Like right here, if I just look at this company, and I don't know how to pronounce it, but they specialize in cybersecurity, talking about malware, deconstruction, some of this other activity. But then they move on. Not that this company is not the right one, but then they move on and they start talking about they do a lot of other stuff. And so if I'm a market researcher, I'm coming through and I'm looking, well, which ones talk about cybersecurity? Here's one that talks about the business model. So they're looking at these. I haven't even seen one that I would consider I like. What I'm looking for and what a buyer typically looks for is a company that pops, right? That you just see it and you go, that company does cybersecurity compared to that company does everything. This one here looks like, I don't know who this is, Agile or technology solution or kind of like that. But here, cybersecurity, emerging technologies, but I can see them talking about risk management, cybersecurity operations, RMF. So they're dropping a lot more keywords. This is what the buyer does. And so you want to make sure your profile is completely filled out so the buyer can find you. This is the number one research tool that they use. If you don't have a good, strong profile, then how can they find you, right? And so this is an important thing to keep in mind. If I just do one more search, for example, let's say you're an SDVO business, and I want to see if this one works, because this is somebody in our community. So if I type SharePoint, it's going to error out. So DSBS is up and down. Let me go ahead and stop sharing so I don't spend time on that. And I think I'm back here. Okay, so the first thing is that visibility, right? You need to understand how the buyer searches for you. And the fact that if you don't even have a narrative, you're not visible to the buyer. And so I want you to be visible. So the action item for you, the thing you should be doing today, is going into dsbs.sba.gov and searching for your company. First, start by searching for a keyword that you think you should be found on. For example, you think you should be found for SharePoint, right? And HubZone, then you should be searching for that and see if you come up. Do that, it takes you 2 seconds. And then when you see your profile and you see where you rank, click on the profile to go into it and look at it and fill out those narrative fields, etc. I have an entire course that's free. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it in our GovCon Chamber website, but it's a DSBS course that tells you how do you fill out the best keywords? How do you write a good narrative? I walk you through, if you're not familiar with, just how to write well, how to write a good first draft, second draft, and a final draft that gets you found in the way that you want to be found. Okay, so go ahead and update DSBS. That's your action item today. In fact, do me a favor, in the chat, if you're following along with what I'm saying, put update DSBS. And one other thing, I see Cecilia put this in, which is great. You gotta love sisters doing this, is for the month of March, any woman-owned small business who wants me to do a visibility gap analysis of your link or DSBS profile and how you look to the buyer, go ahead and go to govconchamber.com/WOSB and fill out that information, and we'll get a report back to you. We got a lot of people who ask for reports, so we're trying to get to it as fast as we can. Okay, so the second way to start winning more contracts as a woman-owned small business is to have more strategic relationships, right? The reason we're perhaps not winning as many contracts as we want is that we don't have enough strategic relationships with buyers. Let me start with just first what strategic relationships are. So if you think about an agency, you can find a lot of different people you meet. We call them leads or contacts, friends, whatever it is. But a strategic relationship is somebody who's committed to your growth and committed to working with you so that they can grow as well. So if you think about two teaming partners, they're both interested in their companies growing, and so they work together strategically to grow. With an agency, you're looking for strategic relationships where you can build that stronger and stronger over the years, so they know who you are and they're there. Examples of strategic relationships you would set in place are with the small business professional. Definitely, you always want them to know who you are in your target agency. With contracting officers, you're not looking for all of them, but you're looking for a few that can really be communicating with you about the overall acquisition process within their agency. Being able to answer some of your acquisition related questions, maybe introducing you to other people. So it's one thing to know about a contracting officer on one particular opportunity. It's another to have a strategic relationship with one or two contracting officers in your target agency in that contracting shop you want to work with. So over the years, you know who they are and they know who you are. And if somebody in the shop says, hey, do you know anybody like Joe? Well, I do. I know Joe, in fact, right? And so the other one is program office personnel. You want to be able to build strategic relationships with 2 or 3 people within program offices that you're trying to sell to. The reason these people are important, like I mentioned with contracting officers, is they can share information, right? Not inside information, but they can help you understand the agency, get questions you have answered. They also can talk to you about opportunities, giving you a long heads up about an opportunity. If you've watched my training on shifting left in the sales life cycle in the acquisition process, the idea of having strategic relationships allows you to be able to do that much easier, because they will tell you about, hey, you know what, we're spitballing a new building and it's going to need elevators, or we're thinking about doing this and we were thinking about using SharePoint for it. Whatever it is, you get into the conversation before market research even becomes formal, or at the very least, you're there and you know about an RFI right when it comes out. You don't have this situation of missing an RFI in your target program office, which sometimes has happened to us. We're like, oh my gosh, we missed it. But if you have a good strategic relationship in there, they'll let you know. They'll make sure you know. And the last reason it's really valuable to have these strategic relationships is they'll make introductions to other people. Maybe they're not the one who can help you on something you need, but they can introduce you to Sally, and Sally's able to talk to you. Maybe Sally won't be a strategic relationship, but she can be a person you can talk to in the short term about an opportunity or about a piece of information you're just trying to understand an agency more, et cetera. So introductions are great. I've got this other graphic I want to share just to make sure we're all familiar with this on when you're building strategic relationships. The 7-step process that we created is designed specifically for this. This is what we follow with our customers in the workshop. You do research to understand your target agency and who might I want to build relationships with. Like I said, in a contracting shop, you might want to try to target contracting officers who typically award in your type of business, contracts that are ones that you wish you won. And then as you do the research, you start doing targeting. In our workshop, we just had a customer this week where we were reporting back to them and we helped them with this targeting, this idea of finding a lot of people. And we found them 500 people within a particular agency that they're interested in getting into. And those 500 people, the whole idea is we're whittling those down to 100 to 200 people that we'll actually outreach to. And then of those, we're hoping to land like 10 strategic relationships. And those relationships, just so you're tracking, and the reason you want those relationships is they lead to opportunities, which lead to you being able to write winning proposals and start landing more sales, right? And that's what you want to do. And so these strategic relationships are really important. By the way, if you're in the sustaining membership, inside the library, as a way of just saying thank you, we have several different free courses. And one of the courses is about cold calling, doing the outreach and starting new relationships in there. And so go check that out in your library. Okay, and in the chat, put strategic relationships. If you're following that, it's important to have strategic relationships if you want to start winning more contracts. Let's talk about the third reason, perhaps, why women-owned small businesses are not winning contracts and what we can do to reverse that and start moving forward, at least for your company, if not all women-owned small businesses. We're not letting buyers know that we're interested in working with them and that we're capable of working with them. We need to be able to do this in order for them to approach us in any way with requirements that we can bring a solution or a product to. So again, let's talk about the acquisition process. In this case, I want to talk about the process for determining the acquisition approach that buyers follow. So if you're familiar with sources sought and RFIs, the reason they put this out is because they're looking for industry to respond. Typically, RFIs are about information, requests for information. And that's more about when it's done right. That's more about the technical requirements, the scope of the work. That's perfect. You still want to respond to it. But the part I'm talking about is the sources sought when they're looking to industry to say, are there sources being sellers who can do this work that we're trying to do? This is where they're trying to determine, do we put this opportunity out as full and open? Do we put it out as total small, or do we set it aside to women-owned small businesses? They want to know that through this sources sought, what they're trying to determine more than anything else is, if we set it aside to one of these groups, will we get a sufficient amount of responses back that are qualified, awardable responses that we won't have to recompete this out or resubmit it out? And so they want to make sure they get enough responses. And so what I mean is, if they do sources sought and they only get 2 women-owned small businesses to respond, that doesn't give them confidence that 2 women-owned small businesses will respond to the RFP when it drops. They would rather have a much larger pool of interested vendors, if you will, responding to sources sought. And so my activity for you is that you need to respond, significantly increase the amount of sources sought and RFIs that you're responding to. And there's multiple reasons why, and I want to share just a couple of them, but responding to a sources sought should be a fairly easy activity for you. If it's not, I would submit that you're responding to things that are outside your core competency. If you keep the focus on what's on your core competency, you'll have a lot of reusable material. And at some point, 60, 70, 80% of your response can be reusable material, even if you massage it a little bit. And 20% is about that specific agency, about that specific program office, or about that specific requirement. So let's talk about a couple of reasons why it's important. The first thing, and this goes back to the whole bullet, is when you respond to sources sought or RFIs, you're letting the federal buyer know that you're interested in an opportunity. You're raising your hand and saying, I'm interested in this opportunity. When it comes out RFP, I intend on responding to it. Ironically, by the way, government, if you're listening, you should make sure you're providing us enough information in the sources sought and RFI that we fully understand the requirement. But when you respond, you're letting them know you're interested, which is perfect. The thing that women-owned small businesses in particular need to pay attention to is we need to work as competimates, meaning letting other women-owned small businesses know that this RFI or sources sought is out, and encourage them to respond as well. We're not really working together in the response. We're just working together to make sure we're responding so that there's 10, 20, 30 women-owned small businesses responding to an opportunity. And when you talk about an opportunity being $5 or $10 or $20 million opportunity, there's a lot of women-owned small businesses who would be interested in it. So we want to raise our hand and say we're interested in it, and we're interested in it being small business or women-owned small business set aside. The second reason it's really important to respond, going to this idea of letting them know you're interested and capable, is when you respond to an RFI or sources sought, 2 main groups of people look at it: the contracting shop and the program shop. The program shop is going to look at any of the responses that are coming back that have anything to do with a technical type response. And so now you're getting on the radar of a contracting officer. Hey, I like Jane's company here. She responds to my sources sought. I'm going to make sure Jane is now, I'm going to remember who she is. The same way I'm telling you in the chat, put your core competency so I remember who you are. When you respond to a sources sought, you're letting the contracting officer remember who you are and see you, and they'll appreciate the fact that you responded. By the way, not some half-baked response, an actual response, right, to that RFI. That's what they want to see, or to the sources sought. The other group who's going to read this and look at it, which is vital to you, going back to building strategic relationships, are the program office personnel. These people are going to look at it, and people you may not have been able to reach before, or you didn't even know who they were. You couldn't figure out what their names even. Well, they're now going to read about this stuff. And so it's not only helpful on this opportunity, but these 2 groups of people are going to become aware of your company, of what you can do. And if you write a good response where you talk about their needs in a way that you can address and you can foresee the problems that they might have and head them off, well, they're going to want to talk with you. And if they're in early stages of market research, they might just pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, Jane, can we jump on a call? We just want to talk to you a little bit more about ServiceNow and your recommendations on how we use that with Splunk or something or whatever, right? And so getting on the radar of contracting officers is a really important reason why to respond to sources sought. And then the last part is you're getting the process started. There's this idea that people buy from those they know, like, and trust. And by responding to a sources sought, you're starting that process of getting them to know you and perhaps even trusting you if what you write is valuable to them and they see it and they begin to go, wow, this is a subject matter expert company that we can look to and listen to. Maybe I'll go check out their blogs, etc. So you're starting that process of them getting to know you. And again, it's not about just this one opportunity. You're responding to a sources sought in an agency that you want to sell to. And so when you have your focus tight down like that, then you're building relationships with these people before you ever meet them. And when you finally get in to talk with them one-on-one, they'll know who you are because they've read your material. And now you've got a chance to get them to like you, and you're off to the races there on building that strategic relationship. So this is really important. When we talk about letting buyers know that you're interested and you're capable, you're raising your hand and you're saying, this is why we're qualified and you should work with us. Sources sought are the way to do that. And so many of us don't respond to enough of those. You really need to figure out how to respond to as many as you can in a given month and figure out how to write that in a way that's focused on your core competency. So, and by the way, to me, RFIs should take, 2, 3, 4 days, depending on how big it is. But if it's 10 pages, 2 days or less. There shouldn't, if you keep it to your core competency. If you sell a lot of different things, it's harder. But there's a company in our community right now called Bain Group. They focus on SharePoint. They could write a SharePoint response in a day, probably, to an RFI. It'll be a big lift for them to do it in a day. But when I say a day, those 8 hours, you could spread it out. So you're never feeling rushed. But you do enough of these and you're going to be on the radar of your government buyers and perhaps start doing things that will increase your likelihood of winning more women-owned small business set-asides or contracts as a woman-owned small business. But it all begins with showing up. Do me a favor, put show up in the chat. Just let me know that you understand by responding to sources sought, you're showing up. And I heard once somebody say, I think I heard it in vacuum cleaner sales actually, when I was doing that a long time ago, but 90% of success is just showing up, right? And so put show up in the chat if you understand that sources sought is a way to show up. So if you want to start winning more contracts as a woman-owned small business, remember these 3 things, right? Make sure you're visible to your federal buyers in DSBS. Do that today. Start building more strategic relationships within your target agency. And then finally, let buyers know that you're interested in working with them and you're capable by responding to more sources sought. Remember, sustaining members, you guys can get access to a lot of good training. One thing I did want to point out is I have a course. It's a $1,000 course that would be putting out separately on Udemy and some other places, but it's a very involved business development, how to just be the best at business development. I think it's like 125 lessons, really diving into it. But for sustaining members, as a way to say thank you, we just shoved it into your membership. That $1,000 course is in there for free for life for you. So make sure you go check it out. It's already in there for you. I just haven't had a chance to push the notice out to people, but it's our way of saying thank you. Occasionally just giving you a little gift like this, in this case, a big gift. Remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. Part of the process is showing back up. I'll see you in the next training.